telling people to just eat less to lose weight is some of the laziest advice any of us have ever received. You agree? Great, me too. The fact of the matter is that most of us have tried that before. And every single time we cut back because we want to lose weight, what happens? We end up feeling deprived, we end up eating more, and we end up eating more and worse things and gaining weight when we're trying to lose weight. So what are we supposed to do instead? Especially if you know that maybe you need to eat a little bit less, but real talk, you really don't want to. You want the results, but you do not want to feel like you've been placed on food punishment to get those results. That's what we're going to be talking about today. The title of this video is How to Stop Eating So Much Without Feeling Like You've Been Placed on Food Punishment. Go ahead and get a notebook and a pen because there's sure to be some gems that you're going to want to jot down and remember. While you grab your notebook and your pen, I'm going to introduce myself. Hello, my name is Concita Thomas. I'm a food and fitness strategist. I help women who are 40 and over drop 30 plus pounds without diets or excessive exercise. I know you're like, girl, how do you do that? Well, here is one of the ways that I do that. I'm going to teach you a simple tweak that my clients and I use to address this, how to cut back without feeling deprived, without feeling punished, and inevitably just finding yourself eating more out of frustration. So here's what I want you to write down. You ready? Focus on eating order over willpower. Focus on eating order over willpower. So many times I have said, and people have said to me, I really wish I just had more willpower. I have all the greatest intentions. I really want the results. I know that I need to be cutting back, but I just don't have the willpower. And the truth of the matter is that while you may need a little bit of willpower to follow through, many of us place ourselves in these extreme willpower challenges that are not only unnecessary, they inevitably backfire on us. Tell yourself not to think of a brown bear and watch how quickly you think of a brown bear. And that's really how this whole willpower thing and cutting back with food works. The minute you tell yourself that you have to cut back, you're going to cut back, you're going to eat less, you instantly sign yourself up for a willpower challenge that you may not even be aware that you signed yourself up for. And the good thing about it is, like, you actually don't have to do that to follow through or to get results. What do I mean when I say focus on eating order over willpower? What I mean is that you can literally approach your meal differently. Rather than telling yourself that you have to cut back, you can simply choose or change what it is that you're eating first to naturally cut back on the things that you need to cut back on while still ensuring that you get in the nutrients that your body needs, not to just end up eating more and later worse. I think we've all been there at some point where we've managed to make it through the meal, right? And we're like, whew, that was close. I went out to eat and, I just clenched my fist and I didn't eat too much, even though I was thinking about it all the time. And then you get home and it's like, what happened? I raided the pantry. How did that happen? It's because of the whole willpower challenge and how much exercising willpower unnecessarily and for prolonged amounts of time just wears us out. And we eventually make worse decisions later. So we're going to sidestep that altogether by focusing on eating order. Yes, that's right. I literally mean what you eat first, second, and last in a meal. So let's talk about this. So this probably sounds overly simplistic, but it actually works. What do you need? What do you need to put in place? What do you need in order to actually make this a reality, in order for this to actually work for you? It's not as simple as saying, okay, a Twinkie and Twix is my meal, so I'm going to eat the Twix first and then the Twinkie second, and somehow I'm going to eat less. No. Like, we're brighter than that, right? That's not going to work. So let's talk about like what you need to have in place in order for this tactic to actually work for you. So the first thing, and we've talked about this before in some of my videos in the past, is the first thing you want to do is you want to build your meals with two goals in mind. So your meals should always have components that nourish you, things that give you the vitamins and amino acids that you need and make you feel full. And then they should always have something that satisfies you so that you don't walk away from a meal plenty full but hardly satisfied at all, and finding yourself again belly full but playing peekaboo at the pantry because the meal didn't hit the spot. So the prerequisite for this to actually work is that your meals need to have the correct components in this in order for this tactic to work. So we've talked about on previous videos, but some of the things or some of the components of a meal that you need for nourishment would be like proper types of protein and the proper amount of protein, vegetables, water, all that kind of stuff. You want to make sure that you have those things in your meals. What are the things that satisfy you? I don't have to tell you. You already know. So things like potatoes, things like rice, French fries, one of my personal favorites, things of that nature, avocado, maybe like a little bit of oil or butter. Those are the things that are satisfying in a meal. So you want to make sure that you have both of those components covered in your meal so that this whole eating order thing can work. So once you've made sure that your meal is built properly, it's built for both nourishment and satisfaction, now you're prepared to implement this whole eating order hack, strategy, trick, whatever you want to call it, tactic, in order to help you eat less. And by less, I really mean like the amount your body needs, to not leave the meal feeling like you need to unbutton your pants and wondering how you went from starving to unbuttoning your pants in 2.2 seconds and you didn't even see it coming, right? So we're not talking about trying to, to exist on less than enough food. We're really just talking about cutting back to an optimal amount, which sometimes can be hard, especially if we're used to over consuming. So once you have made sure that your meals have the correct components, then it's time to look at your eating order. You want to eat strategically. I know you're like, girl, is it really that deep? Eating is eating. Eat strategically? Yes, it's that deep. Only if you want to be able to successfully and sustainably cut back, not feel like you've been placed on food punishment, and actually get results. So what do I mean by eat strategically? This is one of the frameworks that I teach my one-on-one clients and Get It Off, Keep It Off. And this is, in case you're keeping up, this is part of phase 2 of the sustainable weight loss system. It's called the PVE method. P stands for protein, V stands for vegetables, E stands for everything else. That is the order in which you eat. Here's what I mean. So when you start a meal, instead of let's just go with our typical meals, there are certain things in the meal that you're like, ooh, that's going to be tasty, right? Like you go out to eat and maybe you ordered I don't know, maybe a steak and some veggies, and maybe you got the lobster macaroni, that was an appetizer. You got that as one of your sides, and that all this comes out and you're like, ooh, you dive head first into the macaroni and the lobster, right? Because that's the most visually appealing. That's the thing you were most looking forward to. You may be setting yourself up for a willpower challenge if that's how you approach that meal. However, if instead you get started, you practice a tiny bit of restraint, right? Because this is not about restriction, but restraint is absolutely required. So you get started with your meal and you're eating some of the steak and you're eating whatever veggies, I don't know, asparagus, green beans, whatever you like to order. And you're eating that. And then after you get about a couple of tastes into that, maybe you have finished about 25% of that, then you go ahead and start incorporating eat everything else. Here's the crazy thing that happens when you do that. When I first started trying this, I wasn't sure it was going to work, quite honestly. I had more than enough experience with telling myself that I was going to keep my portions reasonable, ordering in this way where I had things that were both satisfying and both nourishing, and then finding myself on the wrong end of tight pants. Oh my gosh, why is my belly hitting the button again, on the backside, pushing out, I'm full. It was so good. My taste buds were popping. We all know that moment where we feel full. We know that we've had enough, but the food just tastes so good and you just keep going, right? Well, especially if you started out hungry to begin with. This is especially effective if you start out hungry to begin with. But what I have found is that if you just take a beat, if you take what is not even a real pause and start with the protein and start with the veggies, and you're having your conversation and you're eating and you're chewing and you're swallowing, etc., that little bit of a pause between you and the thing that you typically overeat, that little bit of pause build in the time for your belly to tell your brain that, like, I'm no longer starving, for you to register that all, and for you to be able to then stop when you're full without feeling deprived when you do it. So here's the thing. What usually happens is we start eating, like I said, we start eating with the thing that's most appealing, especially if we're hungry. Sometimes that thing, and here's the real trick, especially if we're talking about like carbs and fat, sometimes those things aren't as filling, like they are not as filling in the moment as protein and vegetables. So what happens is we can consume a whole lot in terms of calories without consuming a whole lot in terms of volume. So we don't even really feel that full, even though we've scarfed down plenty of calories. So what happens is when you eat protein and when you eat vegetables, first of all, those things normally take longer to chew and swallow than carbs and fat. Those things usually are more, they're heavier texture, have more volume than carbs and fat. Those things tend to fill your belly and you feel it more quickly than carbs and fat. So what happens is you no longer have that, like, that starving feeling. You start to get that belly expansion, right, where you feel like, okay, like I'm filling up with food. I'm starting to hit my satisfaction or my full point. So then you can literally find yourself at a restaurant, at your friend's house, at home, putting down the fork, still with plenty of pasta on the plate. Why? Not because you've been told to, not because you're trying to cut back, but because you literally are satisfied and you feel full and you're like, okay, like that was enough. And let me tell you, the power, the difference in knowing that you stopped because you felt ready to stop and not because you had to, not because you're trying to cut back, is just, it's amazing. It is actually game changing. So if you watch my stories, you saw I shared yesterday, Wednesdays are my coaching call days with my one-on-one clients, and usually I'll pop on and share a win or two. But yesterday it was just like so overwhelming, like the wins that these ladies were getting while working the system in the one-on-one program, that I came on and I just like shared them all. And if you watch the story, one of the wins that I shared yesterday was about exactly this. So one of my one-on-one clients went out to an Italian restaurant, and if you know anything about Italian restaurants, you know that it's going to be typically carb and fat heavy from the sauces and things like that, the bread, the pasta, and it could very easily be protein light in most cases. However, when she went out to the restaurant, she ordered, with the thing in mind that I just taught you about, making sure that your meal has components that nourish you and components that satisfy you. So instead of just like blindly just being like, okay, give me a pasta dish, and you know how it is, like it's a plate, it's like this much pasta, maybe like, little pieces of meat, like maybe that big, and maybe it comes up to about that much. And usually not many veggies to even talk about, right? The amount of veggies that you normally get in an Italian meal is negligible, right? But she's like, no, I'm going to give this a try, because here's the thing, like I want to win and I need to practice. So this is a perfect opportunity to practice. That's another thing, like this method gives you a sense of empowerment instead of like, oh my gosh, like I'm on my program and I'm like trying to lose weight, so I'm not going to go out to eat because I don't want to mess up. It's more like excitement, like, okay, I get to practice this thing. I get to see like if this thing can work for me. And so she went into her meal with that mindset, because she's like, listen, real talk, I want results, and real talk, I'm going to be traveling and eating out at restaurants until Jesus comes back. So I need to figure out how these two can work together. So she ordered her meal. She got, I think it was chicken. I don't know if it was chicken or steak, but she got a meat. She got some vegetables, and she got the pasta that she wanted on the side. She got it as a side dish as opposed to an entree. And here's a tip that I didn't even plan on giving, but like that's really smart, because whether it's an Italian restaurant or whether it's an Asian restaurant, but for sure, like different types of cuisine where it's like super carb heavy and they tend to skimp on the protein on you. Like, have you ever had shrimp fried rice and actually counted how much shrimp you actually gotten and realized that you had a box of rice? So like when you're in scenarios like that, or when you're eating cuisine like that, it's a very cool little power play to order like the protein and the veggies and like have whatever starch that would normally come on the side, because then you're able to flip the the balance of that meal. So she did address, making sure she had the nourishing components, her protein and her veggies. Then it was an Italian restaurant. Of course she wanted pasta, so she got that on the side. And what she told me was, Concita, like, real talk, like, it worked. She said, I ate my food, I was satisfied, like, I had like a small bit of pasta as opposed to like a huge plate of pasta. I didn't even have the garlic knots. But this was what was most important that she told me, because this is what this video is all about. She said, and I didn't even feel deprived. Listen, I'm telling you, this stuff works. It doesn't only work for me, it's working for other people. And if you choose to leverage it, it can work for you as well. So that said, let's see. We talked about what you need to focus on in order to be able to naturally eat less without feeling like you've been placed on food punishment. And that thing was eating order over willpower, right? Like, nix the willpower, save that for something else in your life that requires it. Number two, we said that in order for this to actually work, like, the meals have to have the right components. Like, there is no strategic order that is going to make Twinkies and Twix as a meal work for you. Like, it just doesn't work. Like, we have to make sure that we have the components that we need, so the things that nourish us and the things that satisfy us, and both are equally important. We said that part. And then we said the order is PVE, protein, veggies, then everything else. You get about 25% of the way with your protein and your veggies. You give your belly time to start to fill up a little bit. You give your mind time to realize that you're not starving and you're not that hungry. And when you start to incorporate everything else, the magic is, like, you will be able to stop at what is a reasonable amount for you because you want to, not because you're trying to cut back to lose weight. So that said, I hope that you found value in this. I hope that this was helpful for you. If it was, please do me a favor. Drop in the comments, what was your biggest takeaway from this? Where is it that you need to practice in order for this to work for you? Do you possibly not build your meals appropriately, so no amount of eating order strategy is going to help for you? Do you possibly build your meals appropriately, but you've never tried this eating order hack and you are excited to give it a try? Let me know in the comments. There was one other thing that I wanted to say, I forgot to say, but when I glanced down at my notes, I remembered. Give yourself grace with practicing. I come on here a lot and I share some tips and some tactics that you can use. And the thing, though, that sometimes makes us give up a little bit too fast or makes us feel like, oh my gosh, this can't work for me, is because maybe we try it one time and we're like, oh my gosh, Concita, like, I still ate the whole thing. Or, oh my gosh, Concita, I didn't eat the whole thing, but I know that I ate past the point that I was full. Something like that happens. Well, here's the thing. Rome is not built in a day, and you didn't walk the first time you decided to give it a try. So do not count yourself out if it doesn't go perfectly the very first time. Just like anything else, this is going to require some practice, but what I can guarantee you is if you commit yourself to the practice, if you commit yourself to giving this a try and practicing it over and over, it will eventually not only work, but it will become your default, it will become your habit, and you will not be sitting down to a meal and thinking, okay, PVE, protein first, protein and veggies, right, everything else next. You will in the beginning because it's a new skill, right? So like any other skill that we have acquired, in the beginning, there is some consciousness put into trying to develop that competence, right? The first time, we started to speak, like right now I'm speaking, I'm not thinking about speaking. I may be thinking about what I'm going to say, but I'm not thinking about how do I like form my lips and my teeth and my tongue in order to get the appropriate sound to come out. But when I was a baby, I sure did have to think about it. So it's the same thing with this. So there will be some consciousness to trying to develop this competence in the beginning, but over time it will work, and then over time it will become an unconscious competence, and it will become a habit. You will literally sit down and this will just be the way that you eat, and you won't even be thinking about it. It will just happen. So that is how I am able to help women lose 30 plus pounds and keep it off, even though they're over 40, and do so without diets and exercise, because I give them simple frameworks to help them tweak what they're doing instead of overhauling it, so that they can develop competence that gets them results. It becomes unconscious competence. It becomes a habit. It just becomes a part of who they are. And that's the real secret to getting things to work and to work long term. So that said, I've already asked you to drop your biggest takeaway. If you are someone who's like, yo, this was dope. Like, I'm not only am I going to try this, I want all the frameworks. Like, I want the step-by-step system. I don't just want like one framework. I want the full package, because I am a woman over 40. The shenanigans, the weight loss shenanigans of my 20s and my 30s have come home to roost. I'm finding it harder and harder to lose weight and to keep it off over 40. The things that used to work don't work any longer. I'm having to fight and scrap for every single pound, and I don't like it. I'm not willing to give up. Still want my results, but I don't like what I'm experiencing, and I want some support and some accountability with this. If that is you, please, I invite you to apply for Get It Off, Keep It Off one-on-one coaching. All you have to do is go to conceitathomas.com/apply. When you do that, you'll see the application questions. You'll be able to book your application call, and then I will follow up with you, let you know if you're qualified. We'll have the application call, and if it's a good fit, if the problem you have and the way you want to solve it is a match for the program, and if we're a match energetically, right, we feel like we could actually get along for 6 months, then I'll invite you to join the program. So that's all I have to say today. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you again next time. Until next time, stay fierce.